My name's Shane. Thank you, Joe, for the introduction. So my first slide is just going to be a little bit about what is ECMAScript. So my talk is titled ECMAScript Internationalization. But first, what is ECMAScript? First, I'm just going to do one little bit of definition here, which is what is ECMA International? ECMA International is a body that facilitates the timely creation of a wide range of global technology standards. That's their description from their website. ECMA actually has a similar acronym history as IMUG does. That it used to stand for something, but it doesn't stand for anything anymore. And you can go read up more about that on their website if you'd like. But ECMA went ahead and is now the standards body that standardizes ECMAScript, which is a scripting language specification. And the thing that you've probably heard of all these words, the thing you've probably actually heard is JavaScript. And JavaScript is the best known implementation of the ECMAScript standard since the standard was first published. So in other words, ECMAScript is the standard for JavaScript. So when I talk about ECMAScript, I really mean JavaScript. But it's officially called ECMAScript. So who uses ECMAScript? Any guesses for what use ECMAScript? Craig?
I do.
Craig uses ECMAScript. Here's one thing that uses ECMAScript. It's almost all web applications. If you go to any website, www.anything, it's probably using ECMAScript. What else uses ECMAScript? Mobile apps. A lot of mobile apps are also built in JavaScript these days. Servers can use it with Node.js, which is a popular server language. You can have the Internet of Things. There's many Internet of Things devices that are also running Node.js these days. So it's running on your maybe on your cameras or on your little smart home devices. Startups use it, enterprises use it, and students use it. So it's used by a lot of people. And if you don't believe me, here's some statistics for you. So this is the Stack Overflow 5 most commonly used languages. And this is based on a survey of developers that Stack Overflow, the popular programmers Q&A site, puts out every year. And JavaScript, for the last 5 or 6 years, has been the #1 most commonly used language. Another thing I just want to point out to people who are a little bit confused about what's Java, JavaScript. They're not the same thing. They're two completely different languages. They just happen to have a similar name. Again, for historical reasons, but they're completely different languages. So just to clarify, we're talking about JavaScript here. Okay. Just some more statistics, if you still don't believe me, is these statistics on GitHub pull requests. A pull request is basically a way for the community to contribute code to projects that are hosted on GitHub, which is the popular code sharing platform. And if you look at all pull requests that are created on the GitHub platform and you break them down by the language that they're written in, JavaScript is also #1 there. So JavaScript is a very, very widely used language. And that means that if we build awesome I18N tools into ECMAScript, it raises the bar for localization across the whole industry because it touches servers, it touches websites, it touches mobile apps, it touches everything else that I had on the first slide there. So that's sort of our motivation for why we really, really want to invest a lot of time to make I18N great in ECMAScript. So this is just a little slide summarizing where we're at right now. So when I talk about I18N and ECMAScript, what am I actually saying? I'm actually talking about the built-in functions that are built into your browser that produce localized output. So this is not like a library that you include. This is like what's actually part of the language. Any platform that you're writing on and using JavaScript should provide these functions. So these are standard language functions, not extra libraries that you can like download. So this is part of the language. The body that sets the standard for what this is in JavaScript, in ECMAScript, is the ECMA 402 task group, which is the thing that I'm the convener of, which is the task group under TC39. TC39 is the standards body that standardizes the whole of ECMAScript, and then there's a task group underneath that that focuses just on the internationalization part. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And we provide a programmer tool set that conforms to CLDR standards, Unicode CLDR standards. A lot of the localization professionals have probably heard of Unicode and CLDR. That's sort of the Unicode and CLDR provides the basic building blocks for I18N. However, it leaves the actual how programmers use it open, and that's what ECMA 402 is here for. ECMA 402 takes the data provided by CLDR and the standard provided by Unicode and actually gives JavaScript programmers a way to use it and leverage it. And you know, why do we actually have I18N in ECMAScript? It's to promote best practices and also to eliminate the need to carry your external I18N library. If you want to do internationalization in JavaScript, the status quo until recently has been that you have to download a library, basically increase the size of your website to download all the data that you need in order to run your website or app or server or anything in a localizable way. But with the I18N built into the browser, or again, your servers or whatever, it means that you don't have to carry that extra payload. So you can actually reduce your website's load time, for example, by using the I18N that's provided through JavaScript. Okay, so I just want to go through a little bit of how does ECMA 402 fit into the big picture of the I18N stack. So I kind of alluded to this a little bit on the previous slide. By the way, if anyone has any questions, please interrupt me. I like answering questions. I'm just going to go through the I18N stack a little bit. First, we have Unicode on the bottom, which is the standards body. And then on top of that is the CLDR, which is the Locale database. And that is what linguists from hundreds of locales around the world provide data that actually implements the Unicode standard. On top of CLDR, we have ICU, the International Components for Unicode. This is the C++, also Java library that implements the Unicode standard, but it only exposes C++. So if you're writing in C++, great, you can use ICU directly. However, you can't use it from JavaScript. So the thing that goes on top of ICU is going to be the browser engine. So this is going to be Chrome or V8, Firefox, SpiderMonkey, Safari WebKit. Used to be Edge, but no longer Edge because Edge is now using Chromium. So it's just basically those three, Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. And that's the browser engine provides the bindings that let you use JavaScript, but actually call C++ under the hood. And then what comes up next is ECMA 402, which is the API layer. This is the specification that we define that says, well, this is exactly what the JavaScript syntax should look like in order to use the I18N code. And then on top of that, you have the application, which is the thing that uses I18N libraries to actually do the localization. So one of the things that really got me excited about working in this area on the ECMAScript standard was actually a presentation that I gave about a year and a half ago at the Unicode conference, where I was talking about some stuff I was doing in ICU. That's mainly where I entered in this field. And then one of the first questions I got was, can I use this in JavaScript? And my answer was, maybe, let me look into that. And then that's what really got me excited about this aspect of the I18N stack, how you can use ICU but actually use it in JavaScript and get all the extra reads that JavaScript has. So that's the I18N stack. Question.
I don't think we're going to get more into how well it's been integrated yet to current browsers. I didn't hear IE on the browser engines.
We don't. Internet Explorer is not being supported anymore actively. It's a legacy browser. So Edge is the new browser that Microsoft is promoting, and Edge is now using the Chromium engine, which means that you know what comes on Windows 10 is Edge, and Edge is now using Chromium. So the work that we do on Chromium actually supports both Chrome and Edge. Good question. Good question. Anything else? Okay. If not, I'll just keep going to my to the next slide here. Okay, so just to be clear, why do we actually need internationalization libraries? Why don't we just send all this stuff to translators and just have translators do everything? Well, one of the answers here is there's a lot of cases where we don't actually know the thing that we're displaying to the user until the last minute. So for example, Despacito, the popular YouTube video, gets more and more views every second. And we can't just have the translator translate every possible number from 0 to 10 billion, right? We have to format that on the fly. So that's what the internationalization libraries are for. It's for combining with the data that comes from translators, which can provide maybe the strings like the published on, maybe maybe the word subscribe, the word share, that comes from translators. However, for the things like the numbers, like the number of views, the date, the number of subscribers, those are things that have to be formatted on the fly, and that's what our internationalization libraries are here to do. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little bit of a tour of what you can do in ECMA 402 right now. Okay, so one thing you can do is number and currency formatting. We just saw that on the previous slide. I'm going to show you some code. I promise it's not that scary. This is some code for how you might format a number in the locale EN-US, English United States. This is built into JavaScript. If you take this and run it in your browser, it will work. I'm actually going to do a demo of that a little bit later to show you how you can actually play around with this in your browser. But that is how you can use Intel number format to do just a basic number formatting. Very, very basic. Here's how it, and this here is the toLocale string function, and this is a more convenient way to do the same thing as previous. So if you call the toLocale string function, if you have a number and you say, give me the locale string, that's what we named the bindings that go into ECMA 402 from the number type. And this is just a more convenient way to do the same thing as the previous line. Just to be clear, this is internationalization, so we support lots of locales. Here's the same thing, but if you gave the locale Arabic Egypt instead of English United States, you'd get this. If you gave Bengali Bangladesh, you'd get this. So it is localized for what the users want. I'll also give another example for how to do currency formatting. So in this case, let's say that you were in JAJP, Japanese Japan, and you said you can pass an options. You can pass additional options into your function to say, give me the currency and give me the currency in JPY, and then a Japanese yen, and then this is what it will give you. So one more thing, just to be clear, is the stuff that's on top is more efficient if you're formatting multiple numbers, because every time that you call toLocale string, the browser engine has to go into CLDR data, way back down the stack. It has to go all the way down the stack into CLDR data, look up the format, and then pull up the format, and then actually do the rendering for you. And that's takes time. So if you're formatting a lot of numbers, like if you're formatting like a whole spreadsheet full of numbers, you probably want to use the version on top. However, if you're just formatting 1 or 2 numbers and you don't care about performance, it's fine to do the one on the bottom. That's more convenient, and it's fine if you're just formatting 1 or 2 numbers. So that's when you'd want to use the top version versus the bottom version of the internationalization libraries. Does that make sense? Make sense? Okay, great. I'm getting some nods. That's good. But you can also do date and time formatting. Date and time formatting, this is how you might do formatting a date in ECMAX, Spanish Mexico. If you're from the United States, you're like, why is that not 6/20/2019? Well, that's because in ECMAX, the correct thing to do is to do the month is to do day, month, year. So that's fine. You can do the same thing with the toLocale string on your date type. So in this case, the format is slightly different. You actually have 2 digits for the month and not just 1 digit. Here's ZHCN, that's Chinese, China. And then you have an example here where you can pass lots and lots of cool options into these objects. I'm not showing you all the options. You can go and onto the documentation later and find all the options. But this is an example where if you made an English India formatter and then gave it all these options for how you want your dates to be rendered, this is what it would give you. This is the way that you can customize date and time formatting. Okay, so that's date and time formatting. So numbers and dates and times, those are two of the most popular use cases. A third one is collation. So collation means alphabetization. It means how do you put things in order? A before B before C. That's what collation means. So let me show you a little bit of an example here. I'm going to do a collator in German, and then I'm going to make another one in Swedish. And then we're going to see how the order changes based on the language. So using the collator function, we can use the compare method, which lets you compare two strings, and then it tells you whether the one on the left is greater or the one on the right is greater. So in this case, this function is telling us that the thing on the left is smaller than the thing on the right, because A is smaller than Z, right? Well, obviously A is smaller than Z. What's going to happen when I go ahead and run this through the Swedish collator instead of the German collator?
Other way around.
It's going to be the other way around. It's going to be the other way around, exactly. So that's what the collator does. And just like with the date and time formatting, you can also use the locale compare function, which is more convenient, but might be a little slower if you're doing a lot of comparisons. So in this case, English and Danish, it might be surprising if you don't write those languages, but this is what happens with this. That's on the right. That should be AA is greater than AB in Danish. Yep. Okay. So that's what happens with collation.
I think it's worth noting that AA in Danish is greater than CC.
It's also worth noting that AA is greater than AZ. Yeah, is greater than ZZ. It's greater than ZZ. So AA is alphabetized in the phone book below the letter Z, because AA is its own letter, and that letter is indexed below Z in Danish and in Swedish. So,
question: Is there why there's a discrepancy between in syntax between compare and locale compare? You have the language code in the front for compare, but for locale compare.
So that's actually a great question. The reason would be that the locale compare function, if you don't pass any locale, is going to default to the browser's default locale. So in order to be able to call the function without any extra, without telling it the locale, you have to first pass the argument of you always have to pass the argument that is the string that you need to compare to. And then the second string is going to be the locale. And then the third parameter, if you had a third parameter, would be the options. Yeah, so that's a great question. If we compare, for example, to the date and time formatting, the two locale date string doesn't take an extra argument because you don't need anything extra in order to format the date. But when you do a comparison, you're comparing two different objects, and therefore one of them is the receiver, and the other one is the argument. Great question. Great question. Anything else? Okay. I'm just going to there's one more current feature that I want to talk about before I get into the demo where we can play around with all this in the browser. So plurals. This is available in Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Node.js. It's not available in Safari. I'll talk about that later. But the long story short with Safari is if you know anyone who has the skills to implement this in Safari, please put them in touch with me and we can get this in Safari. But right now, it's just Chrome, Firefox, and Edge, and Node. Okay, so this is how you might make an install plural rules for Russian. And if you're familiar with Russian, you know that Russian has many different plural forms. In English, you just have it's either plural or it's not. It's either plural or not. It's either one or many, right? But in Russian and Arabic and many other languages, it's much more nuanced. There's up to 6 cases of plurals. So if I give it a 1, I get the plural form 1, O-N-E, which is different than the number 1. So the number 1 produces plural form O-N-E. The number 3 produces plural form few, and 6 produces many. And all those will result in different words. If you were to say, like, how many dogs are there, it's going to be a different word for each of those in Russian. Okay, so that's plurals. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how you can actually play around with some of this stuff. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but if you go into your browser, and you can do this in any browser, not just Chrome, although I'm using Chrome here, and you go to, and you press, you can go to the developer console. You can, one way to do it is to right click and go to inspect. The other way is to press Shift-Control-I, and you can open up this thingy, which is basically a JavaScript console. You just go to the console tab right here, and then you can actually run live JavaScript code right in here. So yeah, that just returns me that number. So for example, I can run one of the examples from the slides, like, to locale string, and it actually autofills for me. Isn't that nice? And I can do that, and then it gives me the locale string. Let me zoom in a little more so you can all see that. So this is a cool way to play around with it. I can do so if I run to date string, you don't want to do that because that's not localized output. But if you do to locale date string, since we're in English, it might be the same thing. Well, actually, no, it's not. It actually gives us the more compact form, which is nice. But in general, you want to use the basically another nice thing about this version is that you can just if you use the to date string or to string versions anywhere, you can just swap it in, and then you instantly get localized results. So if I don't provide any locale, it's going to use the default locale in my browser. But then if I do provide a locale, then it will give me the correct results there. So yeah, maybe I can just try a few more here. This gives me different results for every one of those. Yeah, to locale time string I think is kind of interesting in CHCN. It gives me the characters there for the Chinese. Okay, is there anything that people want me to type in here and see what happens?
Egyptian Arabic.
For to locale time string. Yep.
Let's try Arabic in another, like, Syrian.
If I just give generic Arabic, it's going to give this, because the way that we filter for giving the special the Arabic script digits is if you have a country code. Mm-hmm. FRCA for to locale time string. FRCA. Oops. Let me fix that.
What about really rare one like SENO?
SENO.
Yeah. Oh.
So yeah, this is like Chrome.
So bringing up that point here, CLDR has bugs. The bugs do get fixed. So sorry, here we go. So CLDR has bugs. Bugs get fixed. CLDR brings out new revisions. How fast do those revisions get into browsers?
That's a great question. So the update process is so CLDR has releases twice a year. Those releases, when they're released, get pulled into Chrome and typically get shipped in the next Chrome release that's after the CLDR release. And then after they're released in Chrome, then it takes a little bit of time for everyone to update their browsers. Chrome has a pretty good update cycle, but it may take some time for that to get into browsers on like older operating systems. So the update speed for this is it's we like to make it as fast as possible. It does take some time, but like I think for sure in a year, maybe even 6 months, you'll be able to see that the CLDR changes reflected here.
So,
Sorry, go ahead. Just follow on question. Yeah. Yeah, of course. So just follow on then is how do you know which CLDR version you're on?
You can't. That's a great question. You can check the browser version, and you can check the what is it, navigator.user agent. User agent will tell you, in this case, I'm running Chrome version 73, which is actually not the newest Chrome, but I'm running Chrome version 73, and how do I know which CLDR version is reflected here? That's a good question. I will. Yeah, it's in the release notes. Is there a way for me to actually figure out, like, here's the CLDR version that's back in this function, like programmatically? That's a really good question. This is, I mean, you can do it by just looking at the browser version here and then looking at the release notes.
so one thing that users would expect or like is consistency with the platform they're on. And currently, depending on which device I'm on, I would get different behaviors for internationalization. So if I use ECMAScript in my browser as opposed to trying to inherit what the platform would provide, will I see differences, or how do you address that?
That's also a good question. So in the case of Chrome, the behavior is going to be consistent across all websites if you're using Chrome. Is it going to be consistent with the data that the system provides? Like if you're running on Android or if you're running on Windows, that is a question. In a lot of cases, that if everyone keeps up to date with the latest version of CLDR, great. For the case of Safari uses the same ICU implementation that's actually in the operating system. So that will be the same if you're in Safari. However, Safari has other problems in the sense that they don't have the latest features in the ECMAScript, but the features that they do have are going to be consistent for Safari on Mac OS 10. For Chrome, I mean, I'm on a Chromebook, so it's going to be consistent here. For Android, there's been an ongoing effort to see how we can take Chrome on Android and make Chrome on Android use more of the Android-based locale data. One of the problems with that is we don't necessarily know what locales the platform ships. Different OEMs, Samsung or Motorola or whatever, might ship different versions of data and might ship different locales on each device. But Chrome wants to guarantee that it supports a certain 70 locales, so this is 70 languages. So in that sense, Chrome wants to ship data to make sure that it supports those languages. And if we just relied on the platform for that data, then there might be some missing data. So it is a complicated question, and it is something that we're actively looking into. And I actually have a slide later on where I actually talk a little bit about this. And if you have interesting ideas for how to work around these issues, I'd like to hear more.
Hey, Shane. Hey, I was wondering, do browsers typically use the ICU of the platform, or do they ship with their own version of ICU?
Chrome ships its own version. Safari uses the one that's in Mac OS 10.
Mm-hmm. And Firefox?
Firefox, I believe, ships its own.
Oh, great. Thanks.
I'm going to try one quick experiment. Do the locale date time. Oh, sorry. Do an experiment. Locale date time for IT. So that should be pretty straightforward. Okay, now do it for ENIT. And so the question is, maybe a future feature might be to use territory containment, because IT is Italy. Italy belongs to Europe. Europe then should go to EN 150. So try EN 150. And there you go. So that might be an enhancement to put in. We have to solve that with our applications.
Yeah, that's an interesting issue. Yeah, for sure. This is this is in this case, Chrome is going to be just calling into ICU. So if this problem is in Chrome, this problem is also in ICU. So for sure that there's actually an ongoing effort with Marcus Scherer, who's not here tonight, who is working a lot on language matchers, the language matcher, and that could be part of that effort. But I'll definitely point this out. Okay. I also do have more slides, so let me get back to my slides. Okay, so I showed you a lot of those features: number formatting, date formatting, and where are the others? Collation and plurals. Collation and plurals. Okay, so those are 4 great features, but I want more features. There's all these. Here's just a list of some of the feature requests that we get, because we get feature requests for I want more features. So we actively do add more features into ECMA 402 to support these requests. And all the features go through a rigorous process to evaluate the need for the features, because a lot of times these features might not actually, we have to make sure that they're going to, have use cases, that they have solid use cases. And we also, really spend a lot of time making the APIs for these features. So I'm going to show you some of the features that are in the works now, that in some cases you can use them now. I'm going to show you the active feature proposals. So one of them is Intel relative time format, which is shipped in Chrome 71. It's also shipped in Firefox. And this is how you can do that. This is how you can use relative time format. Relative time format tells you the time that something happened relative to another time point in time. So in this case, if something happened 3 quarters ago, this is the string you get. If it happened 1 day ago, then this is sorry, in 3 quarters in the future, and then minus 1 day is 1 day ago. So this is the kind of output that you get here. And of course, this is localized. So in this case, 2 days ago, there's no word for that in English, but in Spanish, then you'd get this. For actually in 2 days, sorry, in the future 2 days. So yeah, okay. So that's a relative time format. I hear some murmur. If there's mistakes that you see, let me know. And it could be that some of those mistakes are actually things we can fix. So that's always good to point out mistakes. Intel list format. This is shipped in Chrome 72. It should be shipped soon in Firefox. It's implemented in Firefox. This is going through code review processes now. So this is what this might look like if you had these 3 vehicles and you passed it through the list format. This is what you'd get. A conjunction means the and. You can also do it with or in Spanish. There is actually an interesting bug that this has been a bug in CLDR for a while now for a list format. It's not showing up here, but the all this disjunction and also the E conjunction in Spanish change depending on the following syllable, kind of like an or a in English change. And this is actually a bug. And if you try doing it in Chrome or IC right now, it actually doesn't work, which is kind of embarrassing, but we're fixing it. And yeah, it's in the works. We actually have an active CLDR proposal going on right now to fix that. So this is a good question for like, when do I see this in Chrome? Well, first ask it in CLDR, then we have to implement it in ICU. Then once all that's done, then Chrome has to update their ICU version, and then magic happens.
So what happens if it just doesn't display?
It just doesn't conjugate it just doesn't conjugate correctly. So it'll show you EHOS or EHOS instead of EHOS EHOS, right? Okay, so but overall the feature works. So you can use it now in Chrome. Just know that there's some issues, but those issues will eventually be fixed. Okay, so Intel Locale is shipped in Chrome 74, and this is what this might look like. So this just basically lets you break down the pieces of a language tag, of a BCP47 language tag. And this lets you get out the different features of the language tag like this. the language and hour cycle and calendar and other things. So this is basically lets you break down your language tag. So this in this case, it's you have all these different pieces of your locale, helps you get the different aspects of it for you. Okay, date ranges.
Question.
Yep.
Sorry, is that functionality implemented on in the browser engine? Because I don't think it's part of IC4C.
This into locale, this is it's shipped in ICU 64.
Okay, because I was just looking for this functionality in IC4C today, and it was still doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's in, well, the ICU 64 ships a what's called a class called Locale Builder, and that's draft. It's not stable yet, but Chrome is using it because Chrome uses draft APIs, and that basically allows it to construct this and then get the data out of that via the get Unicode keyword, which is also draft API. I believe that was ICU 63. I want to get, speaking on that note, I want to give a shout out to Frank Tang. He's been doing great work to implement the V8 bindings. That's why Chrome has all these cool features. It's in Chrome is because of an engineer on our team, Frank Tang. I don't think he's here tonight, but he's been doing a lot of great work to actually implement these features in V8 so that you can use them in Chrome. Date ranges. Date ranges. This is what date ranges look like. So if you have two dates, you can call format range, and it gives you the nice little range, which is also localized. So those are date ranges, and that was shipped in Chrome 76, which I believe is still in Canary. Maybe it's getting out soon, but that's very, 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 very new. So maybe check back in 6 months, and you might be able to use it. Here's one that is also shipped in Chrome 76. Date style, time style. This basically is lets you customize the length. So when I was doing the to-locale date string earlier, it was always like sort of the compact version, but maybe you want to have the more expanded version that spells out the month names. This allows you to do that more easily. So date style, and time style. So time style short, date style short. And then if you have maybe time style medium, date style short, you might get something more like this. None of these examples actually have date style long or time style long, but if you had those, then it would be spelled out more. I can't run these in my browser because this is only Chrome 76, and we just checked my browser is Chrome 73. So I can't just show you more demos of this one, but you'll just have to believe me from the slides. Another one, numbers, additional features for unified for Intel number format. This is one that I've been working a lot on. You can use compact notation. So, for example, on the YouTube page to show how many views the Despacito video has, you can do this, and it shows it. This is the long format, but you can also have the short format, and this is localized, of course. You can have units. This is how you might format a unit, a unit of measurement using Intel number format. You can also do percentages and force the sign, the plus sign or minus sign. You can actually already do percentages, but the sign is the sign is. The sign display is what's new with this proposal. Give you minus 55 or plus 55%. So it's good for showing like the stock price went up 7% today. Okay, so that's another cool feature. And another one which is still, this is the one that's still earliest, that's an active proposal. So this is not yet implemented, but it should be shipping later this year. Is Intel display names. So this basically lets you take the browser, at least Chrome, is already built with a lot of locale data for how you display lots of different types of entities, month names, day names, currencies, units, and many other types of things that you might want to say, like the names of the week, Monday, and you might want to localize that string. That string is already in the browser. But it's not exposed. You can't use it in JavaScript. But now you can use it in JavaScript. At least you will be later this year. and in Chrome. We'll be able to do it later this year in Chrome, asterisk. But this is what that might look like. So this is in ZH Hanti, Chinese traditional. This is, for example, currency names in English. And that's the full list of features that we're currently working on that are active proposals. There is one there, but that's so I've shown you sort of the present and then the near future, but there's also I also want to talk a little bit about the future directions. But before I get to that, I have a question.
Can I get a list of the? Can I generate a list of the available locales if I want to give a user a selection?
Can you get a list of the available locales? So there's supported locales of in these different features here. So this gives you the based on the locale matcher, the supported locales of. So you would give it the locales you want, and then it'll tell you which ones are supported. So you can do that. That being said, it's a lot of times you should just, the best way to use these internationalization libraries is to just let them be a black box and just let them do the work for you. Just give your locale and we will do the best effort to give you the right string. If you start doing things like this, you know, then you start like trying to hack around what the internationalization library is here to help you do. So just like, also another thing I should point out is you can give us a list of locales to like fall back to. So, you know, maybe the user, maybe you have a user who speaks both English and Spanish and they prefer Spanish, but they can also have English. You can give them both English and you can give both English and Spanish to any of these functions. And we'll use Spanish first if it's available and then fall back to English if it's not available. So it's best if you just treat us like a black box and just let us figure it out for you. But these functions are available if you need them. Okay, until display names, and next is future directions. So future directions, one is message formatting. So message formatting is IC message format. If you're in the localization industry, you're probably very familiar with that. You may have mixed feelings about that, about IC message format. So one thing we're thinking about is, should we make INSOL message format? Is that actually something that is useful to have in the browser? We could just leave that, let that be a client-side feature and just let, you know, basically any programmer decide which syntax they want and implement that and download the library to do it. Or we could decide to ship that in the browser and make that available to everyone. So a pro of adding message formatting to ECMAScript is that it promotes best practices. Everyone's the same, everyone's consistent. A con is that it locks the ecosystem into a single format. So if we were to provide ICU message format in JavaScript, it means that basically it's a very, very strong signal that this is what we want the standard message format syntax to be. However, maybe people don't like ICU message format. Maybe they want some other kind of message formatting syntax. So this is an ongoing discussion. We haven't reached a solid conclusion yet on message formatting. Smart units, this one's kind of fun. This is one that I'm hoping to work on later this year. So smart units means road distance, for example. What unit do you use to measure a certain amount of road of distance, for example? It depends on the locale. It's not as simple as imperial versus metric either, because if you're in Great Britain, you use yards for short distances, but you use feet in the United States. So it's not even as simple as imperial versus metric. And the cutoff between when you say feet versus when you say half a mile is also varies, or when you switch from meters to kilometers. So smart units. So those are some of the questions there. Person height, the way you measure. That's another example of a unit context. So when we talk about smart units, it's not as simple as saying, give me the distance, give me the unit of length for this locale. It's not that simple, because these are both units of length, right? For road versus person height, but the actual, units that you use for that context is what changes. So unit context is what we're talking about with smart units. There's lots of other things we can do with smart units. So that's one area. CLDR has some data for this. However, CLDR is not completely filled out. So the first step for implementing this in JavaScript is to first get CLDR to support to support everything we needed to support. And then once that's done, we need to program it in ICU. And then in parallel with all that, we can have the ECMAScript proposal that goes through the proposal process. The ECMAScript proposal process is its own thing that takes about a year. And then we have to have, we can call up Frank and say, hey, Frank, can you implement it in V8? And then Frank will hopefully implement it in Chrome. And then that's sort of the whole process for how you go from ground zero to a new feature. Another one, and this is actually related to what,
So when you change units, you're also going to do the conversion?
Yeah, so that's going to have to be part of this, yeah.
All right, and then you have difficulties with the precision of the conversion as well, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting questions. There's a lot of really interesting questions with smart units, because another issue is we have to know the precision in order to pick the right unit, because of the way that the numbers are rounded. Because if you're very close to the threshold between feet and miles or meters and kilometers, we have to know what the precision is, and we have to actually do the rounding of the number before we can pick the right unit to do. So the first time I saw this problem, I was thinking, oh, that's not too hard. You can completely decouple formatting from unit selection, but the two actually have to be coupled at least a little bit.
And even if you're given the target unit, the precision of the conversion is an important issue, how much rounding you do.
Yeah.
It makes a difference to the user and how the value is used.
And sometimes you round to the nearest 50 or something, not just to the nearest decimal point.
Well, different locales round differently, but separate from that issue, just if you have an inch and you're converting it to centimeters, whether it's 2.5 or 2.54, can make a difference to the value that you're giving the user, right? So think of what it would mean in currency if you were converting dollars to pounds, and whether you were doing some rounding and accumulating errors along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really good points. I want to follow up with you a little bit about this too. Cool. So smart units. Okay, and then one more is also related is to what you were talking about earlier, is actually the locale data provider. So the problem is that sometimes websites might want to have their own style guide. They might want to have their own. They might want to always force a certain display name for Hong Kong. They might want to use the Oxford comma or not use the Oxford comma. They might have different requirements. They might want to provide data for a certain locale that the browser doesn't support. So there are cases that the website might also want to provide their own locale data. That's not just what the browser provides. And another use case is the website might want to guarantee a certain CLDR version. The website might also want to say, we're running on CLDR 35, period. And they know that that's going to work across all the platforms that they're running on. So this is a case where basically can we or should we give websites a way to say this is the CLDR version to use, and then provide their own data, but then still use all the built-in browser algorithms to do it. So basically it could allow websites in a certain way to ship just the delta of the data between the browser and what the browser actually needs. So this is also an active design discussion that we're going through right here. A pro is that, for example, websites can support locales, even if the browser doesn't have the locale installed. A con is that it'll be less consistent I18N across the platform. So you can go to different websites and you actually see different types of formats. Whereas if the browser enforces the certain CLDR version on all websites, then that's going to be consistent across websites. So it's a bit of a trade-off between like how much control of localization we want to keep in the platform in Chrome versus how much do we want to allow websites to use. And it's an interesting design question, because there's a bit of a tug of war here, because there's the question where it's like, okay, you have a product is going through LQA. Your LQA person said, oh, the date format is wrong in Hebrew, and then you have to go fix it, and you want to fix what they said in Hebrew, but then you're like, well, that's what Chrome said, and then it's actually a sealed Chrome bug, but then it's actually a CLDR bug, and then it takes a long time to fix. However, you might also have you could also make the argument where you should just use what the platform has, but then there might be websites that actually want to fix that bug sooner.
So, I mean, again, yes, you have a very good point, but again, if you were to provide a locale data provider in ECMAScript itself in the browser, it has to be overridden for many, many instances, especially financial locales where the locales are cross-region and they're not really actual locales as what BCP 47 recommends, right? So there are lots of exceptions to the rule.
It is certainly a very interesting and challenging design space here. And about how we do locale fallbacks, it's a great example. And then it's also a question about like how much of the data do you overlay? Do you just overlay the pieces that you need? Do we require that you provide the full data bundle, or you just provide an overlay over it? Great questions. Another question.
Just another point. What would this do with a website bloat? Like, what would be the size of the file that the provider would have to?
Great. Yeah. So one of the advantages of having one of the advantages I listed earlier in the presentation about having these features in JavaScript standard is that you don't have to have bloat on your website. So a locale data provider necessarily does have to add some of that bloat back. It's not going to be all the bloat because there's two pieces. There's the locale data, but there's also the code that implements the algorithms for the locale data. So by decoupling this, the website could provide locale data, then still use the browser's algorithm. So it's going to be less than if they just bundled everything together, both data and logic together. It's still going to be less than that. And there can also be a system where the website only falls back to its own data provider only if the data is not available in the browser in a satisfactory way. So it's the data footprint of the locale data provider, although it's non-zero, is less than the status quo of not providing it, of not having this feature at all. Great questions. I really like this.
So we add the intel with all the different locales into the browser. Is it dynamic in that it only loads what it needs? So I'm thinking in terms of low bandwidth regions that only need one or two locales with the fonts and et cetera, and don't want to have the overhead of loading everybody else's locale information that they never use.
You're talking about the browser?
Browser, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a problem for Chrome. Chrome has a download size, as a fixed download size. It's a little bit bigger than it probably should be, but it's a fixed download size, and that download size is no longer growing. So we try to, at least it shouldn't grow. Like this is actually a problem. We're actively working on this. Frank Ting is also working on this problem about the download size of Chrome. So about 2 years ago, there was a decision made that Chrome on Android is not going to grow anymore, or if it does grow, there has to be a really, really good reason that it grows. So there is this effort that we want to add more locales to Chrome on Android, but we can't do that because it requires data. So there's sort of a couple ways around this. One is that you can have a ICU 64 shipped with the ICU data slicing, which allows you to pick out at a much more granular level than was possible before what data that you actually need, which allowed Chrome to cut down a little bit on the data that they actually have to ship with the browser. The other way that Chrome on Android is dealing with this problem is by downloading an extra language pack during the update cycle, which allows Chrome on Android to basically sideload extra locales during the update cycle, rather than just the ones that are bundled in the initial app download. So it is definitely a problem, and kind of trying to figure out our way around that. And the way that it ties also in with this possible locale data provider that we're looking at is also interesting. So this is definitely an active thing. And I'm actually giving a talk at the Unicode conference in October about this topic, about data slicing and data providers.
Do you have any data on the client side? How many users are using more than one language or more than a couple languages on their device or on the platform? Because for a particular user, they're they're not going to use all 70 or however many you have, right?
Yeah, there's we know in India it's often common to have multilingual users, especially in the NBU markets. It's very common to have multiple languages. I don't have numbers right now about how common it is to have more than two, but that's certainly data that is that we can look at.
But in the Indian market, it's totally,
There you go.
it's totally valid use case to have at least 4 locales at any given time.
For a single user or share?
No single user.
And that's because
We're just going to give you guys the mic.
you can all leave. We'll just carry on.
No, that's because
but-
even in the metro areas, again, you can have users who are actually using multiple languages across the same urban area.
Well, I could believe that. I guess the question is particular user, if they had all of the locales that were available, if they had all the locales that they could use, would they keep changing between them, discounting talking to other users, right? I'm talking about websites. They probably have one preferred locale and they would keep with that. They only switch locales because they can't get the one they want, so they'll go to a second or third choice, right?
So in the case of Wikipedia, we did a lot of user experience testing with language selection. And we found that, in multilingual areas especially, you need at least 2 locales at a minimum.
Yeah.
Which are primary locales. And then we actually allowed folks to set up to 4.
Yeah, I think the issue for a lot of users is if they don't trust the site, if they don't get their language, they'll change. Or if they don't trust the quality of the localization, they'll also look in multiple locales.
Yep.
But hopefully that will be different for an app. You can continue now.
Yeah, there's only a couple more slides left. So the other future feature that we're looking at is more about gender inflections and capitalization. For example, I was talking earlier about list formatting and gender in Spanish. Do you capitalize day names? So we provide the day names, but do you capitalize the day names? That varies by locale. So those are open questions. ICU and CLDR do provide data for a lot of this, but the question is, how do we provide an elegant way for JavaScript programmers to provide that type of information? And so that's another thing that we're looking at, and how this ties in with the ECMAScript standard. Okay, so now I have asks of all of you great, excellent audience members who've been asking lots of great questions. So what do we need in order to continue this vision of building a great I18N API for JavaScript? One is we need implementations in browsers besides Chrome. We have Chrome is, I always said about how Frank Tang is really, pushing Chrome ahead. So Chrome is currently the best in the market right now for this. However, if the feature is just in Chrome, but it's not in Safari or Firefox, no one's going to use it because they want to support all the browsers. So in order for this feature to actually be something that web developers can use, it needs to be implemented everywhere. So Firefox has a lot of these features implemented, but not all of them. And Safari just is kind of needs some help. So if there's anyone here who works at Apple, maybe you can talk to someone who can get this prioritized, because we really need this. Okay, so that's one thing we need. Another thing we need is polyfills, which can actually help bridge the gap between browsers who support the feature and browsers who don't. And some of these features that I showed you have polyfills, and some of them don't have polyfills. So a polyfill basically means I can use this feature, and if the browser supports the feature, then I just use it out of the browser. But if the browser doesn't support the feature, then I go ahead and download basically a library that implements it for me. And we should have more polyfills but if you're a JavaScript programmer, this would be a great opportunity to get started contributing polyfills. Polyfills are really useful. Another thing that we need is, it'll be nice, we have the standardization process, and we have some L10 and I18N professionals who participate in the standardization process regularly. However, that number could be larger. There's everyone has different experiences in this industry and knows different things, and we have a subset of expertise that goes into building these, but the more input we can get on these features while they're being developed, the better. Every one of these features has the way we work is on GitHub, and every one of these features has a GitHub repository. I can actually show you that. Why can't I show you that? So for example, I have a bookmark here to my favorite one, which is unified number format. It's the one I've been working on a lot. And there's this repository. If there's any issues, you can go here and you say new issue if you're logged in, and then you can, that's how you can engage in discussions on specific proposals. Every proposal has a README that sort of shows you what's going on with this proposal. And if you want a full list of the proposals, if you go to the ECMA 402 main website, and I'll have this link bigger on the next slide so you can see it, you can actually go ahead and click here and see all the list of all the active proposals. So all the ones I just showed you are all listed right here. I didn't talk about Segmenter. I missed Segmenter in this presentation, but that's another one that's open. But all the other active proposals are listed right here. So back to the slides. So you can join our monthly teleconference meeting. We have a monthly teleconference meeting. This is one way to get involved with that, is to email this address. This address goes to me as well as a few other people on the basically chair board of ECMAScript. And I also have the email address big here in the corner. And then this URL is the URL for the full list of the proposals that are actively being developed. So you can go ahead and see them. And there's like, Shane, there's this feature that you're showing me that seems wrong. Can you go fix that? Well, leave us that feedback, because our goal really is to sort of build the industry standard of what the perfect I18N API looks like. And that's a very ambitious goal. And the only way to make that goal, to really achieve that goal, is to hear all these problems with these APIs as early as possible in the process. So that's why I'm really excited to be able to speak here tonight at IMUG in front of all of you, and then get more engagement with this process. On the other corner is my contact information. Yeah, and that's this is my last slide. So, all right.
Oh. Hello, Jay. Quick question. Has there been any talk about implementing ICU's rule-based number formatting and/or rule-based transliterators into Intel?
That's not one of the active proposals. There may be a, I may actually look at the, so the place where we collect feature requests is here in the ECMA 402 repository, which is this link, this bottom link.
Mm-hmm.
So if you click this bottom link and you go to issues, you get here.
Mm-hmm.
So we can search for, does someone ask for RBNF? No, no one has asked for that. Or a role-based number format. Maybe I spell it out.
Doesn't look like it.
It doesn't look like any of these are related to that. Maybe has anyone asked for a transliterator? No.
Well, should
There's the
I?
answer. There's your answer. The answer is no. And you can be the person who files the issue to make us look at that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Over there.
You mentioned JavaScript polyfills. Are there any plans to have official polyfill libraries and data hosted somewhere for browsers to use?
So the way we've been discussing about how to build polyfills is that there's a number of libraries that exist, such as Globalize.js, among others. I don't want to pick out globalized JS as the example, but the author of globalized JS does participate a lot in our processes in the teleconferences and things. So one of the paths forward possibly for building polyfills is to basically use the globalized JS infrastructure to implement these polyfills. And a Google closure is also another library that loads this data and provides a subset of these features. So a lot of these, basically the answer for how you do polyfills is basically leverage one of the existing libraries that tries to do things like this. And they've already figured out the best way with the current status quo on how to load locale data and how to load algorithms. And then you can leverage that to basically make the polyfill.
Right. So is it being considered as an official ECMA project or just ad hoc?
It's ad hoc. Okay. This is a community-wide, industry-wide project, and whether these get implemented, it's not like there's an official ECMAScript project. It's more like when there's a community member or a company that thinks this is important, then they'll implement the feature, and then it could be an official polyfill, but it would only be official in the sense that like we can advertise it on the ECMAScript proposal repositories. There's a couple centralized NPM node packages that have polyfills in them, so it can be official in that sense. But it's not like there's like officially effort to do this. Like ECMA International is a great organization. However, the people who actually like work on these things are people who work for companies, right? And it's just based on what resources that all the companies have to devote to building these things. If you're a JavaScript developer, you can write the polyfills and you can be like famous and stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, now this row here is going to have a round table. Yeah.
But I mean, the right place to actually find different implementations in JavaScript is, go look at the JavaScript Foundation and the projects that are listed there. And most of the internationalization projects are actually part of that, including globalized JS and others. So again, the language foundations are the place in open source where you go and look for libraries, not the standards body.
It's okay. Yeah. Sorry, I just don't want to be hogging your time, Shane. But I was wondering, has there been any discussion about just exposing ICU, the browser's ICU to JavaScript?
The full ICU?
Yep.
Well, full ICU is written in C++.
Yeah, but I mean, like for example, like Stephen Lewis wrote the ICU wrapper for Node.
For Node.
Was there ever any like some discussion about that you could actually just make a full wrapper that could expose the entire ICU?
That's kind of what we're doing in ECMA 402.
I guess so. Yeah, but I guess
we're
it's
doing
just piecemeal,
it
right?
piece by piece by piece.
Yeah.
So full ICU, I work a lot on the ICU code, right? Full ICU, there's a lot of pieces of ICU that are kind of like, I don't know if we really want to expose that. Okay. It's so with kind of one of the reasons why we're putting so much time into really thinking deeply about every single feature that we put in ECMA 402 is that we can really make a very, very highly polished API surface for applications, for websites to use. And that'll be much more polished than if we just like said, here's ICU for C, let's just throw it all out without thinking about it too hard. That's kind of why we have this process.
As an ICU user, I understand completely.
Anyone else? Any more questions? Thanks, Shane.
My last word is that I really hope to come home tonight and have my inbox filled with people saying, give me more information, I want to participate.
Yeah.